What's up, guys, and welcome back to Bass Fishing Tips. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Coike style baits, or urchin style of baits, whatever you guys want to call them. And we're going to be focusing in on how to fish these things without forward facing sonar. And so if that is interesting to you, make sure you stick around, because we're going to break it down, how to rig them, where to fish them, everything that you need to know to take this bad boy and go and catch a fish on it without forward-facing sonar, because it is a very, very powerful tool without the forward-facing sonar. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you guys about my website. If you head over to my website, you're going to see a couple different things. Number one is going to be my different e-products that I have available specifically for this channel. I've got my beginner's guide to bass fishing. I've got my bass fishing field guides, which cover over 30 different individual techniques and lures that we use for bass fishing. It gives you rod, reel, line recommendations, colors to choose for what water clarities, how to retrieve the baits, cover and structure to fish them on, everything that you would need to know, as well as my seasonal playbooks. It covers all 4 seasons from a 10,000 foot view down to everything that you need to go and conquer that season, as well as my new physical merch like the bass hat that I have on here, as well as several other designs. So if any of that stuff interests you, I'll have it linked down below in the description in the pinned comment for you guys to go check out. Now, without any further ado, let's get into talking about the Coike style of baits, or the urchin style of baits. This is a very popular shape over the past little while here in the bass fishing world. And what's really funny is I was watching videos like a couple of years ago, completely in Japanese, where these guys from the company Hide Up Tackle that made the original Coike were fishing this thing from the bank, and they were having a ton of success. And because of those videos, I got really interested in this style of bait and going in and using it on the bank, and using it as a kind of like a bank beating tool, like we would a wacky rig or a flipping and pitching setup or a swim jig or something like that. And that's really how I focused in on and learned to fish the bait. And then over the past couple of months to a year now, we have seen a rise in this bait in the tournament fishing scene, specifically geared towards forward-facing sonar. The guys using these things to catch them using the forward-facing sonar on their boat. Now, all of that being said, I'm not super interested in the forward-facing sonar side of things. It's just not something I do a whole ton or very good at in that case. But I still am very interested in taking this thing and using it as a bank beating tool. And this will include bank fishermen, shore fishermen, pond fishermen, using this tool in that way without the boat, without the forward-facing sonar. So, as you guys can see here, this is what we consider the urchin or the Coike style bait. You got that center kind of ball shape, and then you got the tentacles that shoot out all around that thing, making it look like a sea urchin or a star or a fuzzy thing or cousin it from the Addams family. I'm not sure what that looks like, but it looks like something. Now, this thing has an immense amount of action in the water. All those little tentacles kind of shiver and move and pulse, and I think ultimately that's what makes this bait as attractive as it is to bass. I think when you put something in the water that moves as much as this does, it disturbs as much water as this does, that it just gets a bass's attention and it gets them to bite. Plus, they have not really seen anything quite like this in the bass fishing world. There's a bunch of other theories that it looks like, small little things that bass ate when they were babies and stuff like that. But I think ultimately, at a base level, that's just a lot going on, and it gets a bass's attention, especially something that's used to eating bugs and shad and things that move a lot. They're going to want to eat this. Now, how do we rig this thing up? And I'm actually rigging this bait up 2 different ways, but very similarly in just kind of the way that you've actually got to rig them up. So if you're fishing the original Coike by Hide Up, that's actually a elastomer bait. That thing is going to float, so you have to add weight to it. If you're fishing something like the Berkley Max Scent Moeba, this is already got a little bit of weight to it, but the plastic density is enough that it doesn't sink super fast, say like a Berkley Max Scent General does. They've done something with this plastic formula that they're able to put the Max Scent in it, but it sinks really slow. And so this one is going to sink, so you don't have to add weight to it, but I do, just because of, again, that plastic density makes it sink super duper slow, and I want it to sink just a little bit faster. And I rig it up really simply. There's not a lot going on here. It's essentially how you would rig up, let's say, a Nico rig, but we got to be a little bit specific to the overall shape of this bait. So I take anywhere from a 1/16 to 1/32 ounce nail weight, and I'm going to just go into a bottom point of the bait, right? So it's a round ball. Where's the bottom point? I'm not really sure, but opposite to the top, the piece that I'm holding up here to the top, I'll usually just stick the weight in there. And so I'll stick that little weight into the bottom of that bait, getting it all the way into the bait. And then once I kind of have that point where the weight is at, that is then my bottom point. Wherever the weight's at, that's my bottom point. Then I'm going to take my wacky rig hook and I'm going to run it through the top of the bait opposite of the weight, because I want this bait to drop with that weight down and that hook point up. Now, the way you rig this thing up is essentially just find an open spot in the plastic, and you're going to just run that hook up through the meat of that bait just like you would with a wacky worm. And again, you got the weight on the bottom, you got the hook opposite to the weight, you got that hook point up on top, and then that bait is going to fall just like that through the water column, just like a wacky rig would, with all those little tentacles shimmying and doing their thing. And again, it's essentially a replacement for that wacky rig, and it's going to get bit. I think the biggest thing, again, just to repeat it because it does bear repeating, is make sure that that hook is opposite to where that weight's at, so that that bait is falling as vertically as you can get it, and that hook point is up. So when those fish swim up and they bite it, you're getting a good hook into the roof of their mouth. And that is really simply kind of the most simple way. The way that I'm getting bit the most with it is just replacing that wacky rig with it. Now, when I say that, I mean I'm throwing it around laydowns, skipping up under docks, skipping it up under overhanging trees, throwing it around brush piles, going down the bank and just hitting targets with it, just like I would a wacky rig, to get these bass to bite. I mean, it is really, really fascinating to see how bass interact with this thing. And I think, again, a lot of it has to do with a lot of the movement that it has. And when you go through an area where you normally will throw a wacky rig, just a wacky rig stick bait, and you throw this instead, you guys are going to get some bites. Now, we've seen kind of the hook, weight, bait situation. As far as rod, reel, and line, again, keeping it super simple. It's my wacky rig sit up, some 12-pound fluorocarbon to a 10-pound braid main line, 7-1 medium fast action rod, and then a 300 size spinning reel. Super simple. It's what my wacky rig setup is. Skipping this thing around, treating it like a wacky rig, and going out there and getting some bites on this thing. And for me, I think this is probably the most effective way as a bank angler or as a guy who just beats the bank, not using the forward facing sonar, of going out there and getting bites on this thing and just having a ton of fun with it. Now, there's another way that I rig it up though that I think is important to share with you guys as well. And it's the one that you're going to see a lot of pros doing, a lot of pros having success with, and it's one that I've had some success with as well, but not in the same ways that probably the pros have had success with it. And that's going to kind of be that forward facing sonar rig. And I'm really going to focus on the bigger urchin-style baits with this rig because they're a lot easier to cast. The smaller ones, they're going to be easier to cast on stuff like spinning rods. They're going to be easier to skip just because of their size. These bigger ones are going to be a lot easier to throw on casting gear and stuff like that. And then too, how you actually rig this thing to go out there and fish it is going to be a little bit different. Now, like I said, we're not focusing in on the forward-facing sonar side of things with this rig. And so this really is kind of like a jerk bait replacement. Anywhere that I would fish a jerk bait, I'm fishing that larger Coike style, urchin style bait instead. So again, this is that Berkley Max Scent Moeba that I am using, but I'm rigging it up a little bit different with this one just because of, again, how I'm actually fishing it, how the fish are actually going to eat it, and then obviously the gear that I'm fishing on is going to be a little bit different as well. So what I'm doing is, as you guys can see there, I'm running a treble hook inside of that bait, and that is actually a decoy quad hook with the swivel. So this treble or quad hook actually has a swivel built into it that allows that bait to completely swivel 360 degrees. And then this is a quad hook, meaning that it actually has 4 points instead of 3. And the reason that I like that is because of that right there. I've got 3 exposed points on that hook and only one of them actually buried into the bait. Even though that hook is exposed there on that 4th point, it's buried enough that it's not very viable for keeping fish hooked. But here I got 3 points that they can grab a hold of. And then I'm also running a weight in this bait as well. with this, it all depends on kind of water depth that I'm fishing, what I'm actually fishing around. Again, for the most part, I'm fishing it like a normal diving jerkbait. So anywhere from that like 0 to about 6 foot of water, anywhere that I would fish that jerkbait, that's what I'm focusing in on. And so normally I'm running anywhere again from like about a 1/32 ounce all the way up to even like an 1/8 ounce nail weight, depending on how deep. As you guys can see here, I'm running a little bitty nail weight in this guy just to get it to sink just a little bit. And then again, it's really important on this bait to go opposite of that hook point. So you're gonna go into the bottom of that bait, like I said, just like we did on the other rig, to make sure a couple of things, because this is gonna be a little bit different. You know, this isn't that vertical presentation where we're throwing it in there, letting it sink down to these fish and they're eating it like a wacky rig. This bait is gonna be moving forward. And so we rig it up where that weight is going to be, you know, opposite of that hook point, but I like to actually rig it a little bit offset. So as you guys can see here, the weight is here where this finger is at, and then the hook points are here, because that bait is going to be coming through the water like this. And what I've noticed is when you rig that weight in the back of there just a little bit, when that thing actually starts to shimmy, it'll actually kind of shimmy back towards whatever you're fishing towards. And so it's one of those things that you can get this bait to almost sit in place because of that weighting position. Now, a lot of the times it may just tilt down and just sink straight down, but it's something that I've noticed in current and other places like that. You can almost get that bait to not move forward in a lot of situations, and that's probably something that people don't want me talking much about, but it's something that I have noticed in fishing this thing. And so I like to go just a little bit off of where that hook actually comes out at, just kind of, you know, almost like at an angle, as you guys can see there. And that gets that kind of backward slide out of that bait, as well as just kind of helps promote that forward motion, you know, to get that thing to kind of work through the water column like a jerk bait would. And so that's more of my kind of like jerk bait replacement setup. We got the wacky rig replacement setup. That's probably the one I've caught the most fish on. And then we got the jerk bait replacement setup, which is really interesting. I say jerk bait replacement, but I've also been using it kind of as like a subsurface topwater deal as well. If they're coming up and they're willing to eat up on a topwater, they're also willing to eat up on this thing, which is really fascinating. And I think just the treble hook and that whole overall setup, when you're moving that bait away from those fish really quick, helps to get them pinned and helps to get them hooked. Now, as far as rod, reel, and line on this thing, I'm actually fishing it on my jerk bait setup. Now, this is where I differ from, I think, a lot of people. I know a lot of guys are fishing these things on like medium, heavy, 15-pound fluorocarbon. But for me, I just put it on my jerk bait setup. I've enjoyed throwing it on my jerk bait setup, and so that's what I'm running with, which is gonna be some 10-pound straight fluorocarbon, a 610 medium fast action rod, and then just an 8-gear ratio reel. And again, just tossing this thing in the same place that I would throw a top water, throw a jerk bait, and twitching this thing around and just having a ton of success with it. But that's really the two ways that I'm rigging this bait up. It's also the two like kind of locations and areas that I'm focusing in on with this bait, and I've been having some success with it. As crazy as it is, these urchin style baits aren't just for forward facing sonar. I think they're a tool that everybody can use. And if you guys have been using them, let me know down in the comment section. I would love to know how you guys are catching fish on them. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, click this video. It's popping up right here.